What is good, team? So here we have the bent over barbell row. Now for this one in particular, we're going to use an underhand grip. So it's going to target a little bit more of the lats as opposed to the upper back. Now, one of the key things that I couldn't recommend when doing this movement is having the bar set up in a rack like this. As you begin to load up the weight, it's very, very easy for you to just pick up the bar like so and walk backwards. Whereas if you're starting from ground zero in a deadlift position, especially in an underhand grip, you're gonna have to deadlift it up, get yourself into position, then get into the starting position for the movement, which, don't get us wrong, is absolutely fine. However, you're wasting a little bit of energy that could be used to just generate tension within the lats at the beginning of the movement. So assuming yourself at a rack like so, you'll put your weight on. When it comes to grabbing the bar, typically when I'm doing an underhand grip, I want to keep it in line with the shoulder blades, because if you go too narrow, I mean, you're going to be fixed on a bar, so it's going to be uncomfortable as you get close to the torso, and you're going to restrict your range of motion. And if you're too wide, again, you're going to restrict your range of motion at the bottom portion of the movement, and it's just going to be a little bit uncomfortable. So somewhere around about shoulder width grip will be perfect. Have a play about what works for you, but around about here will be golden. Then when it comes to actually executing the movement, you'll rack it up, and ideally with your torso, the more parallel you can be, the more force you can generate within the back. Because if you're too upright and you're rowing like this, you're going to involve too much of the traps, and if you're too far bent over, you know, it's going to put a lot of stress on the lower back. So for me, particularly the sweet spot is around about here, where you're almost parallel with the floor, but you're a little bit higher up, so probably is about 30 degrees up from parallel. And then the key with this movement is having your feet around about shoulder width grip apart, slight bend in them knees as well, because if you're completely straight as you begin to load, you'll feel really tight tension on your hamstrings and glutes. It's going to be uncomfortable. And if you squatted too far low, your quads are going to be burning the hell out of them. So you want to make sure you've got a slight bend in the knees, pushing yourself back. And the key with this movement is keeping that chest high and proud. So what I like to think of is, imagine I had a bit of a broomstick or just an imaginary line, and as I'm bending over like so, if I had a broom on us, my head, my upper back and my glutes would all be at a point of contact. And what I mean by that is, as you're rowing, you don't want your head to be down, you don't want them shoulders to be hunched, and you don't want a bit of a hunchback. You want to make sure, I like to think of bringing them shoulders up, back, down. And then I think about looking at a specific point on the floor. So there's loads of spots on this floor here. I'll look at one particular one just ahead, so my body remains nice and stable throughout this movement. And I'm going to do this with the bar now. So I'm walking towards the stack, arms shoulder width grip apart, take a few steps back, then my feet are shoulder width apart, slight bend in the knees. I'm just going to go bend, 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 bend until as far as I can go. Then all you're going to think about doing is initiating that movement with the elbows and squeezing your back. Imagine if I had a pen and I essentially dropped it in between them shoulder blades, and as you're at the top of the movement, you're trying to squeeze it together as hard as you can, right? And then you're coming down, push them shoulder blades forwards, squeeze as hard as you can at the top. So going back into position, lean forwards, as parallel as you can go, squeeze forwards. And as you can see, my head's not moving, I'm looking at a point at the floor. I'm not sort of going like this, I'm not looking up in the mirror. And one thing you want to avoid, which as the last reps come in and you do get heavier, you will have a little bit of momentum, but you don't want to lean and swing like this. You want to try and keep that torso nice and stable. Push them arms forwards, up, squeeze. Push them arms forwards, up, squeeze. As you can see, my back isn't rounding. It's nice and strong and stable. Squeeze. Then when you're ready to finish, simply extend up, walk forwards, and rack it up. And that is the bent over barbell row with the underhand grip.